Okay, so welcome to the Kickass Midlife Method podcast, and we're joined by some women live from the community, and we're talking this evening about the fourth pillar of training, which often gets forgotten about, and that is recovery. It's something important that obviously is not just important for midlife women, but for everybody, but tends to be the thing that midlife women kind of sacrifice. So, what we'll cover is what recovery is and why it isn't just an optional thing, because you're undermining your results. Adaptation, why it only happens when you recover properly. The two biggest recovery mistakes that I see midlife women making, how to measure it, how to actually measure when you do need to recover, and when potentially maybe you're just tired and your brain is taking over, telling you you need to stop. And the lifestyle factors that can contribute to you not getting your results, and how to find that sweet spot between undertraining and overtraining. So, what is recovery? Essentially, it's a process where your body adapts to training stress. So, your training stimulus, then you have the recovery stage, which is your adaptation, and then that's what creates the results. So, when you lift weights or you train hard, so whether you're running, you're doing triathlon, whatever you're doing, you're breaking down muscle tissue, stressing the nervous system, creating inflammation, and that recovery process is what then actually leads to fat loss, muscle gain, strength. And it happens after this. So often everyone's thinking about what happens in the workout. It's actually what happens in the workout and what happens with your recovery. So for many of you, particularly when you first start out, you might feel delayed onset muscle soreness, so that DOMS, and that is effectively when you tear muscle fibers, which you absolutely have to do in exercise, and it's the repair through the eating of protein synthesis that repairs that muscle fiber. But that kind of DOMS effect, sore muscles, can be what is going on there. So, what happens if you don't recover properly? You can have elevated chronic cortisol. So, we're not talking about cortisol is a really essential hormone that we need, but we're talking about elevated chronic stress over many months, many years, and that can cause issues with increased visceral fat. So we're not necessarily talking about the fat that you can see on your belly. We're talking about the fat that wraps around your visceral organs. If you don't recover properly, you can have that persistent fatigue. So that can affect your performance. So you might think, oh, it's great, I can keep going, keep doing this stuff. But actually, what's probably happening is it's lowering your performance and you're not. For instance, if you're a runner, you're not running and progressing as much in your running. If you're lifting, you're not lifting as much as you could do if you've recovered at work. All of those things, persistent fatigue is going to affect everything. You're going to have increased injury, risk of injury if you are training and you're not fully recovered. Hormonal disruption, which is already a factor anyway in midlife. Um, and then you plateau. So actually, if you just keep training and you don't give yourself a chance to recover, you plateau or even regress. So no recovery equals no adaptation, no results. So it really is not something that's a nice thing to do if you have time. It's an essential part of your training. So these are typically the biggest mistakes I see. So maybe you fall into one of these characters. The kind of more is better tends to be quite type A people that just think actually the more I do, then the better results I'm going to have. No structured strength progression. You just keep going from class to class. No deload or rest days. Result burnout, hormonal stress, stalled fat loss despite working hard. And then the flip side is I see people also who don't progressively overload sufficiently, so you don't get muscular fatigue, stick to lightweight, same reps, and then too many rest days without real stimulus. So sometimes if you're busy at work or get tired or overwhelmed by work, that can be sometimes people think, well, that means I shouldn't stress my body too much, and therefore there's just not enough stimulus. So it's not either or. You don't need more rest or more training. You need the right balance. So, how do you know what's the right balance? This is what I think is one of the hardest things because the reality is, I think I get up every morning, and if I've got a gym session, I don't want to do the gym session. I don't want to go out and do intervals. I don't want to go running up and down hill ever, really. It might have to be a beautiful blue sky day, and I might do. And you know that often that reason not to is because you can say to yourself, oh, I'm really tired from work, or I've got too much work on, or I feel ill, I shouldn't be doing it right now. And so actually what you need to do is make sure that you're looking at the metrics, not letting your mind take over and talk you out of something. So obviously key indicators to make sure you've got the right balance is that you are following 3 to 4 structured sessions per week. So if you're doing that, then that you're off to a great start. You have your planned rest or lower intensity days. So for instance, all of you guys have got your 3 strength sessions. You've got a yoga in there. Some of you have also got breath work, and you've got that periodization. So build, push, and deload. So that's why we have 6 week phases all the time, and then the 6 week phases change. Sometimes they're not changing a huge amount, but they're changing enough to give you a little bit more stimulus. But there'll always be that the build, the benchmark, and then the deload. Another way you can look at it, and this one is also really important, for instance, around illness as well. When do you train if you're ill? When do you know you've recovered enough? Is your resting heart rate. So, your resting heart rate, some of you have got your stuff attached to the app, and I can see your heart rate. Most of you haven't. If you don't have tech that does your resting heart rate, it's really simple. In the morning, before you start moving around, like before you get out of bed, count your resting heart rate. You find it in your pulse, find it in your neck, find it in your wrist. Count your resting heart rate um, over 30 seconds, then double it. And keep that somewhere, because as you get fitter, your resting heart rate will go down. I think mine's about 44 or something. If that's elevated by 5 to 10 beats, then your body's under stress, and maybe you've not recovered enough, and that can also be an indication that you are ill, and that maybe you need to take a maintenance rest day. So that's a really simple thing you can do. You don't have to have tech, just count it. Just be aware of what your resting heart rate is. And then your heart rate variability. So your heart rate variability measures your nervous system readiness. So I've taken this from the Aura Ring description. It's that measure of variation in time between each consecutive heartbeat. So it reflects how well the body adapts to stress and recovers. A high HRV indicates strong, flexible, resilient health. A low HRV suggests stress, fatigue, or poor adaptation. So some of you will have heart rate variability, or Garmin does heart rate variability, Aura rings. I think some of you got a variety of that, but your heart rate variability also. But you don't need heart rate variability. If you're following the structure, and you're not trying to fling in more sessions outside of the structure that I've built for you, and your resting heart rate, you know what that is, not what's going up, that's good enough. And then what else impacts recovery? So this is all the other things. If we were all professional athletes, and all we had to worry about was just the training and the recovery and our diet, then great. But actually, we're midlife women, and we've got a hell of a lot of other things going on in our lives as well. So key recovery disruptors, sleep deprivation. So that can be caused obviously by hormone change. It can be caused by looking after aging parents, grief, bereavement, relationship issues. All of that can affect our sleep. Inflammatory diet. So that's going to affect your recovery. If you've got fast release sugars in your diet, which includes alcohol, another thing that disrupts sleep and protein synthesis. And then chronic stress. So when I'm talking about chronic stress, is that, as I was saying at the beginning, that elevated stress over many years, many months, when you hit a chronic stress levels. So all of those also impact your recovery. So your body doesn't recognize really the difference between the stress of exercise and the stress of lifestyle stuff. It's all in one. So the real balance is about keeping your training consistent. So maintaining your training rhythm, not no matter what. If you've got an elevated resting heart rate and you're uh, ill, then you would maybe take down the intensity, but actually you can train at different levels, so not the intensity. And then, yeah, adjust intensity when your life stress is high. So, for instance, if as many of us have got like parents we're looking after, going through a lot of stuff with parents, so we're pulled in that direction. We've also got a massive work issue as well, and you feel overloaded in that respect. Then what you would do is thinking about reducing your load but not missing the workout. So that can be a way of maintaining consistency, but also making sure that you're not overtrained from overstress. So does everyone understand that? So we're talking about maybe not progressive overloading if you feel like you've also got loads of other stress going on and it's going to affect your recovery. Instead, you'd be working to maintenance. So the goal isn't perfection, it's regulation. So you build resilience, not fragility. So what it looks like, don't skip training entirely, reduce and intensity, and prioritize like maintenance, technique, and movement. So particularly when consistency can be a difficult thing. So when you start getting consistent, the last thing you want to do is have that affected by something, because the minute you stop doing something, it's so much harder to start again. So instead of missing it, instead of thinking about progressive overload, you'd be thinking, let's focus on like perfect technique. Don't do progressive overload, but keep doing the weights. Before we go into the breakout, what this means in terms of benchmark workouts is that you would go if you feel like you have correctly done your benchmark workouts. And I'm probably talking here about people who are doing benchmark workouts with progressive overload, not with volume. So no one who's doing body weight needs a deload week, and nobody who's done kind of a benchmark with how many in a set period of time. But if you've done progressive overload and you've really, you know, done that correctly, then next week you would think about doing a bit of a deload week, whereas you'd still do the workouts, but you wouldn't be thinking about progressive overload or even 75 to 85% of your max lifts that you got this week. You just take a easy week thinking about your technique to give your muscles a chance to relax, recover. Sorry, not relax, recover.